nicotine, Valium, Vicodin, marijuana, ecstasy, and alcohol. Chorus, cocaine.
5 years has always been a lifetime in the world of rock and roll, but recently it feels even longer. Bands come and go, it was always this way, but with such a ferocious turnover of artists and artisans, it is increasingly easy to lose track of those outfits that are persistent, determined, and consistent enough to stay the pace. It's even easier for established bands with reputations and histories to fall prey to self-indulgence, laziness, and the sheer boredom of being successful. Rock and roll can become a 9-to-5 job, the very thing from which music is supposed to offer an escape. It's no secret that when alternative rock bared its grungy teeth in the early 1990s, it took the biggest bite out of the lucrative cherry pie that metalheads had been eagerly snacking on for the best part of a decade. Hard rock got hard again. Beavis and Butthead mocked the pomposities of metal, and James Hetfield finally got his haircut. Yet what separated the new school of mainstream metal from the old guard, whether it came in the form of Soundgarden's screaming Zeppelinisms, the potent dirges of Alice in Chains, or the sun-baked brick-thick riffage of Kyuss, went deeper than just hair care products. The difference boiled down to an emphasis on substance over style. Current darlings of the music press, queens of the Stone Age, are testament to both these developments in modern rock, eschewing the Stone Age mentality and musical stasis of their chosen genre, as well as reaping the benefits of educations received in other outfits. They bring something fresh, vital and new to a music scene that sometimes appears to be on the brink of extinction. Right now, queens of the Stone Age stand on top of the world, the envy of their peers. You can hardly move for screaming headlines and gushing praise about these desert dwellers who've come to save rock from the bland, inoffensive musical wallpaper it has become of late. Not since Kurt Cobain's Nirvana has there been a guitar band for the body and soul, stimulating and feeding into both equally, while providing a whole new culture to buy into. In Nirvana's case, you had the punk ethic, the nihilism and the very cheap slacker clothing. With Queens of the Stone Age, you've got exactly the same, but with more alcohol, more sex, and less tortured angst. Queens of the Stone Age have stripped guitar music back to its raw fundamentals. Like the Stooges and MC5 before them, they grind away using an insistent, expertly chosen riff and treat music with the seriousness it deserves. There are no pretensions, no ham-fisted experiments with orchestras, no ill-judged dalliances with the avant-garde, and no bandwagon jumping dance remixes to make a quick buck. As Josh Homme's granddad once told him, if you're going to make classic rock, make classic rock. Emerging as a serious international force on the back of their second opus, Rated R, the Queens have created a sound that both updates the stoner rocks of Kyuss and gives classic rock and roll the invigorating makeover it so badly needed. It's common for bands to talk about returning to the roots of songwriting. Usually it points towards an obsession with craft and meaning that denigrates into tedious songsmithery. In the case of the Queens, though, you immediately see their point. Devastatingly arranged, lucidly composed pop epistles you'll hear in 2 decades from now, each one delirious with enough luscious detail to engulf the listener for weeks. The band have already achieved immortality by releasing the heaviest, most honest, compelling and intelligent American rock album in a decade with Rated R. It's the kind of benchmark that sets a new standard and forces contemporaries to slip up a gear just to keep in the race. With the sense of dynamics and brute force of Nirvana at their peak, Queens of the Stone Age could very well go on to finish off what Kurt Cobain started and achieve long-term planet domination. Walking it like they talk it and then some, the Queen's musical epiphanies are like manna from heaven, trashing so-called punky acts like Slipknot, Amen and At the Drive-In into oblivion. Music fans have been hungry for something to happen for a few barren years, and the Queens have timed their rise to perfection, shying away from the same old cliched corn riffs of much of the recent adult rock music. They offer undiluted, power-packed assaults on the senses, with a combination of noise, melody, attitude, and unshakable self-belief. They come to entertain, provoke, disturb, move, and shake up jaded listeners around the globe. They are the world's best rock and roll outfit, on a mission to rescue us from limp boy band pop, bloated corporate suckers, and insincere rockers who say one thing and do another. The 21st century surely belongs to the queens of the Stone Age.
We go to bed and eat breakfast stuff too, you know. I mean, I don't like stick my toothbrush down a beer bottle and go, yeah.
The protagonists of our story, Josh Homme and Nick Oliveri, were childhood friends in the Californian town of Palm Desert, and they've now accumulated nearly 30 years of musical history between them. As youngsters growing up in Palm Desert, life for Homme and Oliveri was pretty bog standard. A lack of access to excitement and outside stimuli ensured that it was easier to obtain good drugs than good music. As the only sensible reaction to a commercial radio diet of inane pop, Josh Homme began escaping from the family home to go to concerts by influential underground hardcore bands such as Black Flag. Through attending these events, Homme found his own identity, one that he could carve out for himself and which was divorced from school and home life. He was becoming his own man, ignoring rules and the disapproval of both his peers and elders. Punk rock and hardcore provided a sense of belonging, a feeling that this was all that mattered, the here and now, the euphoria and rush of adrenaline from the music. Like many rock idols before him, Homme found in music a viable escape route from the drudgery of Palookaville. Nick Oliveri also thrived on the power of rock music and the defiant outsider syndrome. His research was an unstoppable quest, illuminated by a fascination with those rock and roll rebels who lived by their own rules and nurtured a mistrust of the tactics of indoctrination. Indeed, as his legendary nude performances would go on to prove, Oliveri was a rock and roller in the purest sense of the phrase. By the age of just 11, Oliveri had been to his first concert, a US festival in 1983 in San Bernardino, which featured an uncompromising bill of heavy metal giants: Judas Priest, Ozzy Osbourne, Van Halen and the Scorpions. The music he loved was that which just stretched outside the boundaries of normality. Both endearingly naive, but fueled by passion, Oliveri and Homme were a match made in heaven. It was inevitable that Josh Homme ended up playing guitar alongside bassist Oliveri in QOTSA, a local band that came to define the subcultural term stoner rock, since appropriated by the likes of Monster Magnet, Sleep and Fu Manchu. It all started back in 1987 in Palm Desert, Palm Springs, when QOTSA were formed. Something of a musical prodigy, Homme was just 14 when he formed QOTSA in high school, and within a couple of years he was the main songwriter and guitarist. Homme spent every weekend playing with the band at generator parties, either in a backyard or just out in the desert, thanks to a distinct lack of conventional concert venues. These parties cemented the band's local cult status and attracted innumerable disaffected kids searching for some excitement. However, they also gained their fair share of interest from the highway patrol. One party was busted by the police after they discovered that the bathroom was being used as a crystal meth laboratory. Pretty soon, QOTSA had gone from playing at local parties and friends' houses to cutting albums and touring. They reached heights of success that far exceeded their expectations and were worshipped as heavy metal heroes by their rabidly loyal fans. They left the desert for months at a time and played sold-out tours of the US and Europe, while heavyweights like Metallica, Soundgarden, Ween, White Zombie and Faith No More voiced their approval by inviting them to support.
This band's a lot more focused songwriting-wise, you know, with melodies and choruses and stuff like that. Background vocals, you know, stuff like that QOTSA, you know, never never touched on. You know, it's less jammy. I mean, we have some songs where we go into jams live, but it's more focused songwriting-wise. You know, a little bit more poppy, I guess.
After squeezing 4 albums into the space of 5 years, Kyuss disbanded in 1995. When the 4th album, And the Circus Leaves Town, failed to live up to the earth-shattering intensity of the band's seminal work, Blues for the Red Sun, Hom and singer John Garcia fell out amidst heated arguments. The members all went their separate ways, with Garcia joining Unida. For his part, Hom wished to quit because Kyuss was all he'd known. He had joined as an adolescent and was hungry for something different, a new challenge, even though he still loved doing what he was doing. He felt that with a catalogue of 4 solid albums under their belt, Kyuss had had their day and had now come to a finishing point. No long, drawn-out and messy terminations for this band. Kyuss were a highly influential and important cog in the alternative rock machine, managing to avoid the massive exposure of Nirvana, but retaining that band's independent street cred. The group maintained that they were mostly played for critical respect and were unconcerned with fame. In fact, Hom has since claimed that Kyuss deliberately went out of their way to sabotage their chances of hitting pay dirt and getting to the top of the charts. Fans of Kyuss respected the group for splitting up while still in their prime, avoiding a backlash and building a lasting cult legend. It would have been easy to churn out one last record and put a more commercial slant on their sound. But Hom was having none of that. The greatest testament to the band's impact came at their final show, when Hom was bombarded with cries of, "Josh is God." After the split of Kyuss, Josh Homme could not play music for some 8 months. He felt too listless, lethargic, burned out and uninspired. Oliveri, who left Kyuss after the 2nd album, had joined punk rock outfit The Dwarves and had given himself the bizarre new moniker Rex Everything. As hard rock was dying all around him, Homme relocated to study at its former epicenter, Seattle. Here he was offered a place as second guitarist in Mark Lanegan's psychedelic grunge innovators Screaming Trees, when they played the Lollapalooza Touring Festival in 1996. This temporary arrangement became 2 years of touring, with one of Homme's first engagements being a lengthy American tour with Oasis. On more than one occasion, Oasis lead singer Liam Gallagher provoked Homme and Lanegan with his notorious antics, though he soon discovered that he wasn't going to win any kind of battle with those two musical giants. Homme went nose to nose with Liam a few times during the Oasis tour. Homme's time spent with The Trees provided a breath of fresh air, releasing him out of the boiling cauldron of band politics and decision-making. He found it liberating being able to just perform every night without having any responsibility. He was just there to add an extra layer of sound to their live set. He'd chosen to go with Screaming Trees because he didn't feel happy being imprisoned within a certain style or way of playing. It was a rewarding experience for him, as it had nothing to do with Kyuss. There was no baggage from that band. Being with The Trees was simply a case of plugging in and showcasing the subtle art of playing rhythm guitar and enjoying it, even learning something along the way. Homme also found time to study international business as well as produce a series of ongoing albums titled The Desert Sessions for the independent label Man's Ruin. These were collaborative, freewheeling works by a revolving, loose-knit cast of musicians, including members of Fu Manchu, Soundgarden and Monster Magnet. Recorded in the Mojave Desert studio, these records were designed to allow Homme to have as much freedom and creative control as he wished. For Homme, the time he spent with Screaming Trees and keeping his hand in with his Desert Sessions work enabled him to mastermind his next move, to create a blueprint for the perfect rock band.
I've been kicked out of the Dwarves, rehired and quit and rejoined, and and now there's no obligation at all. It's just a thing I do for fun. I don't have to tour with them or anything. This is Queens of the Stone Age is a band that I do seriously.
By now, Josh Homme was itching to record some new material of his own, and so began working with various respected musicians from the celebrated mid-90s Seattle scene, including the Trees' Van Connor, Soundgarden's Matt Cameron, and Mike Johnson from Dinosaur Jr. They issued a series of 7-inch singles under the name Gamma Ray. In time, Gamma Ray developed into Queens of the Stone Age, a name derived from an in-joke from the Kyuss days. Queens of the Stone Age was the insult hurled at the band by producer Chris Goss while making the Blues for the Red Sun album. When he wasn't satisfied with an aspect of their work in the studio, he would tell them, "You guys are like the Queens of the Stone Age, man." This name stuck in their minds, and so when Gamma Ray were threatened with lawsuits from another band called Gamma Ray, they chose Queens of the Stone Age purely on the basis that there wouldn't be another outfit with that moniker. The group's name was also conceived as a challenge to the substantial redneck segment of their audience, the kind of people who would feel not a little uneasy about using the word Queens in conversation. In preparing to unleash his new pet project on the world, Homme had become immersed in decidedly more left-field strains of contemporary and classic popular music, from the krautrock of Can and Faust through to the haunting experiments in ambience of Brian Eno. These influences gelled with those of Gary Newman, Devo, Television and Iggy and the Stooges to set Homme off writing again. He moved back to Palm Desert and set about recording new material with late-period Kyuss drummer Alfredo Hernandez. Homme had no fixed vision of what the band would sound like, but he was keen to distance it from Kyuss. Meanwhile, the irrepressible Nick Oliveri was being kicked out of shock rockers The Dwarves, allegedly for being too rock and roll. This coming from a band that delighted in bizarre on-stage sex acts and band members slashing themselves with razors was certainly something. Significantly for Queens of the Stone Age, Oliveri had developed a proclivity for performing completely naked, something that he continues to do to this day. Homme recruited guitarist and keyboardist Dave Catching to embellish the band's live performance, and then took the initiative to cultivate a brand new sound that signified as huge a departure from the stoner rock tag as could be possible. Queens of the Stone Age made a stab at starting a new legend in the annals of rock music. This was not Kyuss Mark II. With Queens of the Stone Age, Homme was creating what he called robot rock, heavy, dense, clanking music pared back to the bone, with the emphasis on minimal guitar weaponry and drums. The hypnotic, trance-inducing repetition of krautrock would serve as a template for the kind of sound in Homme's head. In tipping their hats more to Can than Black Sabbath and the usual suspects, Queens of the Stone Age were laying down a challenge for their contemporaries. Were they content to recycle the same tired, rehashed formula, or were they going to join them in the next century? When Homme had put down the tracks that would comprise Queens of the Stone Age's debut album, he called his old friend Nick Oliveri to see if he wanted to join. It didn't take him long to sign up. But now the biggest challenge was to convince the rest of the world that here were the greatest band since Nirvana. After a local gig, Pearl Jam's Stone Gossard was stunned by what he'd seen and heard, and so signed them to his independent label Loose Groove. Queens of the Stone Age saw this as an ideal move, as they wanted their music to be positioned in an arty tradition of left-field, maverick rock. Homme never entertained the possibility of a major label deal, as he wanted the music to be undiluted, honest, and untainted by compromise or commerciality. Loose Groove let them get on with it without adding any commercial pressures.
Well, I was listening to a friend's band called the Earthlings, and I was listening to a lot of Ween, Pete Stahl and Dave Ketchen, and they just were able to play whatever they wanted whenever they wanted. And we play rock and roll, but wanted to keep it open like that, you know.
Co-produced by Josh Homme and Joe Barresi of Hole, Weezer, Fu Manchu and Kyuss fame, The Queens of the Stone Age's self-titled debut album hit record stores in October 1998. The set was immediately acclaimed for its invention, wit, originality and technical wizardry. Here was a quite brilliant collection of solid low-end rumble, melodic hooks, probing lyrical insight and adventurous playing. Creating a new element for the band were Homm's mellifluous, understated yet commanding vocals on top of the blitzkrieg of sound. Previously with Kyuss, Homm had concentrated on guitar and left the vocals to singer John Garcia, but here he was belting them out as well as playing guitar. The debut album was confirmation that a period spent away from the slog of touring, recording and more touring could be beneficial. Steady, tuneful, accessible and ethereal at the same time, it was an ideal album for would-be metal fans who hadn't liked anything since Black Sabbath's first 3 records or the Melvins' last. Labelled as desert rock by the band themselves, it was a musical riot, overspilling with ingenious oddball musical reference points and future vistas. This sabbatical of Josh Homm's had obviously been spent ingesting new musical influences rather than illicit chemicals and herbs. To be sure, it was a full-on band effort, an ensemble piece par excellence, with Hernandez's rock-solid drumming perfectly anchoring such standout selections as the melodic Twisted If Only, the slow sexy Walking on the Sidewalks, the hook-filled You Would Know, and the insistent Regular John. Avon possessed a charging rhythm and a soothing vocal that embalmed the listener, while How to Handle a Rope contained verses bursting with messy guitars before melting into an exquisite, yearning chorus section that bridged the gap between metal and alternative rock. Mexicola featured a lyric of rare, simmering emotional density, candour and existential poetry, the like of which is little heard in any musical genre. Setting sun deals hands of gold, there's velvet eyes in Mexico, just a fall away and all she said was true. You Can't Quit Me Baby pitched its wares with a fairly sturdy rolling bass line and a repetitive guitar figure that remained just a fraction ahead of the beat. The climax of the track, though, sped up into an explosive crescendo of noise with dramatic effect. The protagonist of the tale was bringing his own end to the story, one of massacre and self-mutilation, as he could no longer live with his aching desire for the object of his affection. The Queens managed to bring a superior sense of melodic warmth to the music, with impressive vocal hooks, extraordinary lyrics and bluesy boogie. While Kyuss took time to develop their ideas over longer passages of music, Queens of the Stone Age distilled their visions into condensed, bite-sized pocket symphonies. They had taken the best parts of Kyuss and added more subtlety in exchange for a little less surplus fat. The results made for a leaner, tighter, more focused sound. Drummer Hernandez believed that this approach made for a lot of open space and heat in the music, which reflected the change of environment from Seattle to Palm Desert. The surroundings in the desert were sharper, with no buildings or concrete. As a result, thoughts and musical ideas tended to flow better. For Homm, the transition from Kyuss to Queens of the Stone Age was very much a natural progression. He saw the album as taking the spirit of Kyuss, but moulding the songs into something more finite and trance-like. He likened the differences between the last Kyuss record and The Circus Leaves Town, and the Queen's debut to that between the Stooges' The Idiot and Lust for Life recordings in the late 70s. This first album was one of the most sudden and creatively successful about-faces modern rock had ever seen. In late 1998, a single, If Only, was released in the US and gained much enthusiasm and support from the alternative radio stations. Josh Homme, Nick Oliveri, Alfredo Hernandez and Dave Catching toured the album at home and abroad for nearly 2 years, performing with hardcore punk and rock acts like Bad Religion, Rage Against the Machine, Hole, Ween and the Smashing Pumpkins. The group received the honour of being voted one of the Rolling Stone magazine's most important hard and heavy bands right now, while in the UK the album was released by Roadrunner Records to waves of critical acclaim. At the start of 1999, Hernandez decided to leave the group, which left the Queens in desperate need of a competent Styx man. The short-term solution, that of alternating between drummers Gene Troutman and Nicky Lucero, has worked so well that it looks to be permanent. Also in 1999, Oliveri got himself arrested at the Big Day Out festival at the Milton Keynes Bowl in July. Queens of the Stone Age were involved in a small altercation with the UK outfit Terrorvision, with whom they shared a dressing room. Although Josh Homme allegedly tried to land a punch on a Terrorvision roadie, it was Oliveri who got arrested. He was released and no charges were pressed against him.
So many different things, you know. I can't really put my finger on what it is, you know. As far as you know, there's punk elements, there's you know, heavy rock elements, there's spacey, airy elements, and you know, it can go in any direction at any time, you know, from song to song, and which is to me the beautiful thing about this band.
Desperate to maintain the high standards and eclecticism of the debut album, Homme and Oliveri assembled a dizzying array of contributors to assist in the recording of the band's sophomore effort, many of whom had collaborated with or influenced the duo in the past. Screaming Trees' Mark Lanigan appeared, providing some backing and lead vocals, along with his bandmate Barrett Martin. In addition, hardcore stalwart Pete Stahl, Wendy Ray Moan, Rob Halford of Judas Priest, and Like Hell's Nick Oliveri, yes, same name, different bloke, all had a role to play in the recording of the follow-up to the eponymous debut. From the outset, Homme was keen to limit the disc to just 10 songs. He felt it was important not to abuse the storage capacity of the compact disc. Adopting the principle of less is more, Homme wanted to create something as self-enveloped, direct and definitive as the Stooges' Funhouse, which only featured 7 cuts. The new tunes that would constitute Rated R were recorded analogue to 2 16-track machines at Sound City Studios in Los Angeles, where Kyuss had created their masterpieces Blues for the Red Sun, Sky Valley and The Circus Leaves Town. Produced by Josh Homme with Chris Goss of the much acclaimed Masters of Reality and engineered by Grammy Award-winning Trina Shoemaker, these cuts would set the stage for another magnum opus with which to shake rock music to its very foundations. Preceded by the July release of The Lost Art of Keeping a Secret, the Rated R album was let loose upon the record-buying public in August 2000, now on Interscope Records. A monumental effort by the band that even put its predecessor in the shade, Rated R saw Josh Homme finally cast off the overbearing shadow of Kyuss. Providing the ultimate rock and roll antidote to the current glut of crass commercial music shifting units worldwide, the album was a seminal work. The kind of landmark record that will be raved about in 2 decades from now. Dubbed, much to their disdain, stoner rock, due to their drug-addled melange of dirty guitar riffs, abstract psychedelics and hallucinogenic atmospherics, the Queen's major label debut featured 11 stunning, incandescent reasons why that term should be buried for good. Now giving rise to comparisons with the Stooges, MC5 and Nirvana, Rated R represented a band reaching a new level of maturity and expression. The melodies were in your face, direct, visceral, thrilling and immediate, like a freight train running with no stop in its sights. From the moment the first chord was unleashed, it was crystal clear that the band meant business. The opening, demented, irresistibly catchy feel-good hit of the summer was in essence a ferocious litany of substance abuse, mentioning every drug known to man. The good Dr. Homme and his cohorts delivered their fiendish prescription of nicotine, Valium, Vicodin, marijuana, ecstasy and alcohol, before adding a killer dose of cocaine in a startling 2.5-minute 2-chord mantra. One could imagine the record company suits squirming in their seats when they first heard this. The neat, catchy title indicated that perhaps the song was an upbeat pop radio hit with which to promote the album, but one listen would have told them otherwise. The band recorded it to make a point about the arbitrary draconian censorship system in the USA. As they pointed out, the track actually contained no swearing of any kind, and didn't even hint at promoting drugs as a way of life. Incidentally, it would become a single in November 2000, backed by Never Say Never, a cut that recalled the Knack's My Sharona. The Queens also thought that hitting hard with the opening song would cut out the tedious stoner rock thing, which has become something of an obsession with the press. They've always maintained that they were more than just a stoner rock band, and they were particularly irritated by the implication that all they did all day was sit around smoking weed. What followed the opening track could only be described as a potent, astonishing, audacious synthesis of influences, all tastefully melded together by a respect for tradition and a desire to explore new parameters in music making. Some of the songs floated like half-remembered reveries, others grabbed the listener by the throat, and some took them off to strange Byzantine places of the imagination. With all its evocative phraseology, poetic associations, and unusual juxtapositions, Rated R dipped its toes into realms of musical fantasy, hitherto ignored by the rock scene. There were bits you could identify, a bit of Pixies here, something that sounded like a Bleak Bowie album track there, and a Devo feel on the riff-laden Monster in the Parasol. The decadent, nicotine-stained pop of lead single The Lost Art of Keeping a Secret was a brooding combination of metallic, scathing guitar riffs and blacker than Spinal Tap humour, simmering ominously before bursting into life with an infectious chorus. The delightful Autopilot was a hushed, fragile and beautiful slice of acoustic bliss, a true pearl. Mark Lanegan injected another colour into the album's sonic palette, with his own unmistakable deep vocals, sounding like he was on his way home from an all-night bender on his majestic centrepiece, the swelling orgasmic rush that was In the Fade. This was one of the record's standouts, a future classic. Oliveri's vocals on Quick and to the Pointless and Tension Head were similarly incendiary and emotion-packed, while the monumental, sprawling closing track, I Think I Lost My Headache, was something else entirely, a dizzying blast of supernatural jazz horns. Rated R catapulted the Queens into the stratosphere reserved for rock legends, and soon they were gracing the front covers of magazines and receiving masses of acclaim and attention.
They tagged us as one of the bands last year as a stoner rock band, and we're not trying to run with anybody, you know. And as soon as they did, it kind of is Rated R is the result of it.
Silencing once and for all the lazy media tag of stoner rock with its bizarre explosion of different moods and styles, Rated R was an eclectic, raved-up, guilt-free phantasmagoria of sound, oozing no-nonsense punk rock attitude and in-your-face hedonism. It had one foot in the past and another in a new, golden future. Upon its release, music critics and punters were united in unqualified love for the album, citing its breadth of influence, range of expression, and quality of craftsmanship as its chief charms. The New Musical Express even went as far as declaring it their prized best album of the year in their end-of-the-year charts, eulogising its uncomplicated joy. They singled out Tension Head as one of the most perfectly realised rock songs ever written. As well as creating their own stir on the back of tours and the quality of their album, Queens of the Stone Age also fortuitously fell in sync with the climate of 2000, a year that saw something of a revival of American heavy rock in both commercial and critical standing. Acts such as At the Drive-In, Limp Bizkit, Amen, Papa Roach, and You Will Know Us by the Trail of Dead joined the Queens in shifting the musical agenda forever. Not content to stand still and admire their achievements, the Queens continued to tour throughout 2000, including a memorable 5 p.m. set at the Reading Festival. Their last gig before Reading had been Des Moines, the much-derided birthplace of Anglophile writer Bill Bryson, and was another in a long line of punishing American club dates. The band had been on stage in Des Moines just a few minutes when the power went off and a riot broke out in the crowd. The monitors had packed up, so the Queens threw them into the crowd, who began taking them apart. Josh Homme was hitting himself with the microphone, screaming, "Don't fucking come near me," whilst a naked Oliveri was left disorientated and confused on stage, unsure as to who was on his side and who wasn't. The band clearly live for nights like those. They keep the blood pumping through their veins. Another notorious incident occurred on the Ozzfest tour of the United States, where the group slummed it with inferior bands such as Godsmack, Taproot, Shovel and Slaves on Dope. For the Queens, some members of the audience weren't much higher up the evolutionary scale either, not even being able to look at Oliveri's naked body. One particular guy repeatedly screamed "faggot" at Oliveri before he'd even hit a single note. His original retort was to shout back, "I have a PA and you have nothing." Then Oliveri decided to humiliate the bigot by announcing to everybody that he was his lover, at which point the man charged the stage in an uncontrollable rage. Fortunately, this messy situation was brought to a halt when the madman bore the brunt of Oliveri's fists. Another show, at Pomona with Bad Religion, attracted a smattering of skinheads in the audience. Up until the point at which Oliveri stripped off, they were loving the gig, immersing themselves in the vibe. But then, once he was naked, they couldn't even look at the stage. 2000 was a great year for the band overall, but it was their legendary live performances that set the world alight and spread the Queens of the Stone Age gospel far and wide. They went down a storm, particularly at the Ozzfest tour in America and at the Reading and Leeds festivals in the UK. For the band's encore at Leeds, Oliveri took to the stage wearing nothing but his guitar. The next evening, the Queens played at the London's Highbury Garage, beginning a second promotional push for the album. Following a year in which the USA received the majority of the Queen's time and attention, they returned to the UK in November for a brief tour. Some of the venues were actually upscaled due to the incredible ticket demand. As 2001 kicked in, Queens of the Stone Age became internationally notorious when Oliveri was arrested for his onstage nudity. The fearless bassist fell foul of the law whilst performing with the band at the Rock in Rio festival in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, on January the 19th. He came on stage naked and remained so for over half the band's performance. Midway through the set, he received a warning from the side of the stage, which led to him announcing to the audience, "They say that unless I put some clothes on, they are going to call the courthouse. Apparently, nudity is not okay." Despite playing the rest of the set in a pair of black Levi jeans, he was arrested at the end by plainclothes police officers and taken to the local police station. They held him for 10 minutes until the lawyer acting on behalf of the festival arrived. It transpired that Oliveri faced an on-site trial and only just escaped a prison sentence. The bassist was, however, charged with the corruption of minors, which will probably involve a heavy fine. Frontal nudity is considered a serious offence in Brazil, especially when there are under 18s in the vicinity. Oliveri's arrest was likely to have been triggered by the fact that the concert was being filmed live for broadcast all over the country. Oliveri himself told the press the day after that the Queens had been threatened with having their show axed unless he got dressed, and that he was manhandled by a couple of nutters as he vacated the stage. Yet those who witnessed the incident felt that he had consciously played down the fracas to ensure that he got out of the country so that he could get to the big day out in Australia without any complications.
When that whole Seattle grunge thing got like that whole identity crisis about grunge, I mean, it wasn't, I mean, what was grunge? It was just rock. You know?
It's rock and roll at the end of the day.
Rock and roll, period. You know, everybody, you know, we all want to, or certain powers that be want to have a label that they can put it in the right section in the record store.
Whether it be new metal, sports metal or desert rock, the year 2000 surely belonged to the exciting strains of alternative rock music that came shuddering out of America. Completely without warning, Queens of the Stone Age were the cream of a crop of young bands who took USA, Europe and the rest of the world by storm. For the first time since Nirvana's Nevermind blew the world's minds and put US grunge well and truly on the map, this outbreak of brave, intelligent, energetic, agenda-setting disciples of rock and roll had shifted the ascendancy towards the US. But why now? The principal reason must have been a happy confluence of two factors, namely a disaffection with the sterility of much modern music and the coming of age of a desperate group of men who'd grown up in bands and were now ready to inflict their weaponry on an unsuspecting world, who'd lived with Britpop, boy-girl pop and cheesy, mindless dance for too long. If the likes of the Queens were a reaction to anything, then it was the pseudo-intellectual, aimless, rambling, lab-tech noodling that had defined the US underground music scene throughout the mid to late 90s. The glib, chin-stroking, cerebral, introspective post-rockers and lo-fi merchants had pushed rock music up its own backside and out the other side, it seemed. There was no passion, no urgency, no dynamism, no generational position. From Glassjaw and You Will Know Us by the Trail of Dead, through to At the Drive-In, Slipknot, Monster Magnet, Papa Roach, Limp Bizkit, Amen and Lover's Laughter, the new music explosion was a broad Catholic church encompassing great variety, not to mention a huge range in quality. If it could be called a movement as such, then this was one that saw fit to overthrow the tired, stale, middle-of-the-road and narcissistic music clogging up the airwaves and replace it with heartfelt, timeless modern music. It could be termed an unconscious gravity towards classic good music, a feeling that it had to be revived after so much banal, conservative and synthetic pap. And kids have embraced these sounds because they connect with them instinctively on a gut level. They have become absorbed in the frightening rollercoaster ride intensity and extremity of the sound of the bands. Could the new music be merely a drop in the ocean, a limited fad, or is it destined to last? Well, by nature, such reactive phenomenon have always tended to be faddish in themselves. But how faddish exactly will ultimately depend on whether these groups have that most prized thing of all, timeless songs. In the case of the Queens of the Stone Age, there seems no doubt that their music is built to last for a long time, and that it doesn't pander to trends or crass commercialism. There is, particularly on Rated R, an innate grasp of song structure, melody, and songwriterly craft and a poet's eye for compressed imagery. The level of sophistication exhibited on the band's remarkable second album shows them to be painters of sound, visionary artists who happen to be working in the medium of rock music.
He wanted to play naked for you all tonight, and I guess the censors wouldn't allow it, you know. Such is life, you know.
Queens of the Stone Age aren't your misanthropic, self-obsessed bedsit dwellers who enter the land of the living only to make a record now and again. No, they are old-school rock and roll stars with colourful personalities, lifestyles and opinions. They come to rock your world with space-age guitars, a hedonistic attitude that says, if it's there, do it, and plenty of nudity. They are your favourite rockers and cartoon heroes rolled into one. So what about the nudity? Well, Nick Oliveri says he likes to appear naked as it makes him feel good inside and it freaks some of the audience out. He feels that rock bands have a duty to push the envelope and break through barriers of taste, and moreover that some stiff, repressed folk really need to be shaken up a bit. He likes to plant a bit of fear in even the hardest looking people. For instance, the mean skinheads at the Bad Religion show in Pomona, or the rednecks who followed the band since the Kyuss days. Of course, the bigger a deal that the press make of it, the more he loves it and continues to do it. He sees it as giving the finger to the taste police and the moral majority, as well as returning rock and roll to its primitive, outrageous roots. If Oliveri had his way, nudity would be as acceptable and common as watching television. He doesn't understand why so many eyebrows are raised. The Queen's music, particularly on Rated R, deals with unfettered hedonism. The rock and roll lifestyle of living life to the maximum and getting your rocks off. This is an accurate, honest depiction of the band's real lives, which run at breakneck speed. They admit that they write what they live, that they are what they write. They could try to imagine other people's lives and write ornate gothic operas or songs about being a single mother of 4 kids, but that's not who they are. They stress that it's particularly important to write what you know, and from the heart. This 24-hour partying lifestyle is almost a full-time job, though the boys are quick to reassure that they do find time for all the banalities of everyday life, like sleeping, eating breakfast, brushing their teeth, taking a dump, etc. They don't stick a toothbrush down a beer bottle and go, "Party!" One of the most memorable moments occurred whilst recording Rated R when the band had ingested some magic mushrooms. With the whole group as high as a kite, Oliveri attempted to drive his car but broke the key in the ignition. A sing-along session ensued, followed by bizarre attempts at songwriting. Also, before a summer festival performance in Switzerland, the group took some psychedelic drugs and played the show of their lives, running out of material but then making up new stuff on the spot as they played. Josh Homme was keen to contribute a song to a benefit record in aid of Leonard Peltier, which would have been the first political statement he'd ever made as a member of a rock band. Then, when lawyers got involved and he realised the implications of the situation, he withdrew his support. He thought he would have been able to just write a song and give it without having to pay legal representatives to ask if he could be involved. He retreated to playing music just for the love of it. As a working band, the Queens are a tight-knit, hard-working, hard-partying ensemble. They never set out to plan anything as such. What happens in the studio is mainly a result of Homme, Oliveri and producer Chris Goss bouncing ideas off each other. Therefore, their music never sounds stale or formulaic, and it can always surprise. Yet if the flowering of this spontaneity is impressive enough on record, then it's in the live arena that the group really excel. They live for and thrive on being on the road, as each performance can be different from the last and can throw up something unexpected. However, it was during a tour when the group experienced a close shave with death. All members of the Queens nearly met their makers when their tour van spun out of control on 2 inches of black ice in Saskatchewan. The van did a 360-degree turn and ended up down an embankment. The group's musical inspirations and influences are a diverse bunch, and this reflects in their own music. Anyone from Black Sabbath, Gigi Allen, Devo, Tom Waits, Hemi, K.D. Lang, Bjork, The Dickies, Roy Orbison and Johnny Cash to 13th Floor Elevators, The Stooges, Black Flag, Ween, Elvis Presley, The Prodigy, The Cramps, Bad Brains, The Ramones, Goatsnake and Metallica have featured heavily in their lives and have shaped their sound. Other sources of inspiration include Clint Eastwood, A Clockwork Orange, The Shining, Jerry Seinfeld, George Carlin, Converse sneakers, The Three Stooges, the artist Patrick Hutchinson, Baby Spice, Cameron Diaz, the brilliant music journalist Nick Kent, and of course Ozzy Osbourne. The Queens hold Ozzy in high regard purely for the way he's still doing it with integrity and a sense of humour. The Queens have some interesting opinions about the whole Napster MP3 music technology debate. They believe that trading music for free is cool, but when that person starts making money off it and the artist might be struggling to live on scraps, then there must be something wrong with that situation. They are cynical about the level of effect the Napster phenomenon is having on a band as huge as Metallica, but can see how it could seriously affect one that is just starting out. As with all bands, Queens of the Stone Age loathe being pigeonholed and categorised, but the stoner rock tag particularly rankles. Viewing it as an antiquated term anyway, they prefer to be known as a straight-ahead rock and roll outfit, avoiding formulas and bandwagons like the plague. As the Rated R album so clearly testifies, only one full listen to the band's music is needed to be convinced that the Queens are not like most other rock groups. The variety of their material is a wonder to behold, taking the listener on a voyage of discovery. They change gear and flip from mood to mood without sacrificing the group's signature tone. The Queens cannot abide the twice-filtered marketed cover bands that pretend to write original material and sell millions to kids who are shielded from the truth. They regard this music as carbon copies of copies, Positively delighting in the outlaw mentality of rock and roll, the Queens love the idea of using music as a tool with which to wind up narrow-minded people. They are aware of the issue of rock stars like Marilyn Manson influencing easily corruptible young minds enough to persuade them to commit acts of antisocial violence. They view the scaremonger mentality and associated moral panic as dumbass, and they can only laugh at it all, citing the anti-Elvis Presley fervour in the 1950s when it was believed he was the spawn of the devil. Whatever goes around keeps coming around. So, what are the Queens of the Stone Age's music? What is it for? To change the world or people's perceptions of it? The band harbour no such lofty pretensions, although they are well aware of the change they can make in a room for a couple of hours. Hom and his friends grew up playing at parties, so they like to give a show that still feels like one. Hom says that you're not supposed to talk about and analyse music, but just do it. That makes some kind of holy sense.
Kid Rock will outlast them all, because he's got more to offer than just, we're pissed off and we rap, you know what I mean?
Queens of the Stone Age don't easily fit in with the 21st century rock scene where bad boy behaviour has become more and more of a rarity. Their influences and role models mostly derive from another era entirely, a time when it was de rigueur to load up, have sex and have a good time all of the time. The Queens represent a return to these old-fashioned values. With this in mind, it's not surprising that they feel some level of affinity with Oasis, whose hedonistic activity makes most bands look like innocent choir boys on their first night away from the family. Musically, the Queens disprove the myth that heavy rock is boring, one-dimensional music pedalled by dullards who couldn't get a blowjob any other way. The sheer range of sounds found on the Queen's records betray the essence of an innovator, a restless spirit hunting for ever more unique juxtapositions and sonic manipulations. The Queens are alchemists of sound, using their deep knowledge and natural talent to combine the best of yesterday's music with the finer points of today's. In a bizarre universe where things seem to have been turned on their head, kids and parents listening to the same conservative music, the Queens have injected a much-needed shot of anarchy into a complacent vein of alternative music. They have nothing overtly socio-political to say, no lifestyle messages for their fans, just no-nonsense rock and roll without pretension or grand design. The songs betray the band's lifestyle, that of getting smashed because you want to, staying up and living life to the full. They make music primarily for their own enjoyment, and not for a target demographic. The crucial thing in their output is emotional expression. If a song doesn't connect on gut level, then it's not from Queens of the Stone Age. The group shy away from an impenetrable, artsy, furrow-browed music that implies you need to have a degree to appreciate its charms. Theirs is ballsy, open, sincere, and always aiming to be accessible. The Queens are a brooding, magnificent beast, typifying and embodying all that was good about rock and roll in the first place. Drink, drugs, killer riffs and melodies that a milkman could whistle. Perhaps. Their shows are often chaotic, edge-of-your-seat affairs where anything could happen, which is what rock and roll was always meant to be. Some nights they get drunk, fall down, break something and tell an audience member to fuck off before crowd surfing, whereas on other nights the set runs smoothly and without too much danger. Josh Homme and his cohorts remain convinced that in rock and roll there lies a wisdom that, amidst the madness, debauchery, abandonment and fun, is a place of contentment. Queens of the Stone Age are certain that true happiness lies in being able to do what you want to do, whenever you want to do it. But away from the journalistic speculation as to what activity, criminal or otherwise, the Queens might get up to offstage, away from the lurid tales of touring, lies the unquenchable spirit of a pioneering band. They have influences, but not as sources or reference points, rather as fuel to the furnace of a truly scintillating entity. Their domain is the bittersweet, the sweet ache of loss, but it takes a while before you realise how sharp the tang of bitter in their bittersweet is. With the triumphant Rated R, the Queens have delivered the most important rock record since Nirvana's Nevermind. A perfect distillation of slamming drums, howling guitar and inch-perfect melodies allied to a seamless, mischievous sense of experimentation that marked out the boundaries of a higher sonic plateau. Rated R set new standards for rock music in the 21st century. As long as they can perform music and live life to the full, then Queens of the Stone Age can see no reason why they cannot continue their meteoric rise as standard bearers of a fresh, unique form of rock that is not afraid to tip its hat to its forebears.
Thank you for buying Maximum Stone Age. We hope you enjoyed it. Watch out for further titles on Chrome Dreams coming up soon. If you did enjoy it or have any comments or suggestions, write to us at Chrome Dreams, PO Box 230, New Malden, Surrey, UK, KT36YY, or email on mail@chromedreams.co.uk. For more details on joining the Maximum Collectors Club and claiming your free CDs, check out our website at www.chromedreams.co.uk or look at the booklet inside this CD. Thanks again for listening and goodbye for now.